Let's talk about the worst type of jutsus in Naruto today. And by that, I mean those jutsus that only exist to get characters out of sticky situations, aka assholes. But before that, please subscribe to this channel, ring the notification bell, and like this video to help me out. So an asshole is a jutsu that a character whips out of nowhere without any explanation as to how or why, without any foreshadowing, and usually a jutsu that doesn't really make much sense for the character to have, so that the character is able to escape a situation that he wouldn't be able to, or defeat someone else in battle that is probably a stronger character. This usually happens when the writers are kinda lazy and don't foreshadow things, or just don't really want to write a more complex battle and just come up with this jutsu that wins the fight. And I'm really talking more generally here. This doesn't happen only in Naruto. Naruto is actually pretty good at not having that many assholes, but it does have some pretty bad ones, which we're gonna be talking about pretty soon. This type of jutsu is more prominently used by protagonists rather than villains or antagonists, usually because a jutsu that comes out of nowhere from a villain is much more genuine for storytelling because we don't really follow the villains that much, we don't know what they're up to, and whenever they do something unexpected, that increases tension. So for instance, when Madara used Limbo for the first time, stomping all tail beasts in a minute or so, some people may say, oh, that's an asshole, he shouldn't have been able to do that, but you're missing the point. Limbo was a mysterious jutsu. It was built up as a mystery. Wait, how is Madara hitting all those tail beasts just by looking at them and defeating them so quickly? What the hell is that jutsu? This is supposed to create a lot of tension and mystery in the story, which makes the story more exciting and Madara a more terrifying villain. We then find out later on what Limbo is, and it's a very interesting reveal. Limbo doesn't solve Madara's problems out of nowhere. Sure, he got the tail beast pretty quickly, but with the Rinnegan, let's be real, Madara would have caught those tail beasts regardless of Limbo or not. It's just that Limbo is such a terrifying jutsu, it paralyzed Sasuke as well, and we're like, okay, this is not good for the main characters. Of course that not every time a character uses a jutsu for the first time is going to be an asshole, especially if the jutsu was foreshadowed before, but even if it wasn't, for example, Itachi's Amaterasu too, when he escaped Jiraiya's frog stomach, that wasn't an asshole because we know Itachi would be capable of some very powerful things. And if we're being honest, the frog stomach was also a jutsu Jiraiya pulled for the first time, so it's 1-for-1 there. But having said that, let's get to the actual bad stuff. I'm gonna bring 4 examples of some really atrocious jutsus used in Naruto that only served to make the characters escape death or just win a battle. I'm going to do this from the least bad to the worst. And surprisingly, these are all jutsus used by beloved characters, so yeah, brace yourselves. The first one is the frog song, cast by Jiraiya, not really Jiraiya, but his frogs, while he was fighting pain. So Jiraiya was fighting 3 paths of pain at the same time, and he was having a lot of issues with those. They have a shared field of view, they were able to counter his taijutsu, they were able to counter his ninjutsu by absorbing it as well. Jiraiya has said himself that he's never been good at genjutsu, and the frogs understand that genjutsu is probably the only thing that's gonna actually work against the 3 paths of pain. Coincidentally, the frogs have a genjutsu, and they can actually one-shot all paths of pain at the same time. What do you know? Now, of course, this isn't the worst offender because it didn't really win the fight for Jiraiya, but just having this one-shot ability that he pulled out of nowhere to beat the initial 3 paths is very anticlimactic. Wouldn't it have been more exciting if Jiraiya had beaten the 3 paths of pain through clever tactics and well-placed ninjutsu attacks and also taijutsu attacks? Maybe the frogs could have some type of genjutsu that could affect like 1 path of pain, but not all 3 and not one-shotting them. That would have been much more acceptable. If Jiraiya had worked harder to beat the 3 initial paths, the victory would feel more earned, and whenever it's revealed that, okay, they're not dead, you're screwed, Jiraiya, it would have been just much more impactful, because let's be real, no one thought the battle was over after he defeated the 3 initial paths. Everyone knew something was up the first time you watched. There's no way you're like, okay, yeah man, Pain's dead. It would be difficult to fool anyone anyway without the genjutsu, but at least if you make Jiraiya's efforts more valiant, more difficult there, without resorting to a one-shot technique pulled out of nowhere, the surprise that Pain wasn't actually dead would have been much better, and Jiraiya would have looked better in the fight as well because he would have looked more capable. But as I said before, this isn't the worst offender because Jiraiya doesn't actually win the fight. I just think it diminishes the value of the fight. So let's go to another one that's far worse, I would say, and that would be Kakashi Susano slash dual Mangekyo Sharingan. I think it's even worse because of the place it was put in. The Kaguya fight is the worst thing that happened in Naruto, so anything that comes from there is naturally not gonna be very good. Though I have to say Kakashi using a Susano and very different Kamui variants looks very nice, especially the Kamui Raikiri. But having him whip out a perfect Susano the first time he tries to use a Susano, and not even that, from eyes he got from Obito, who was just turned into dust. For some reason he was able to transfer his chakra over to Kakashi. It's just a very long reach. There are justifications you can come up with. For instance, Itachi was able to implant Amaterasu on Sasuke prior to his death, so you could say Obito was able to do the same with Kakashi implanting his Sharingan powers on him. But even then, a perfect Susano? We know Obito was the Jinchuriki of the Ten-Tails, so he had some reminiscent six-path chakras, but enough to make a perfect Susano that was able to fight against Kaguya? Yeah, that seems like an asshole to me. Kakashi shouldn't even have the Susano there. I think I would be fine just with the new Kamui abilities. Maybe a normal Susano, but a perfect Susano. Your first try, Kakashi, without an EMS? That's just too much, and it did come out of nowhere. Okay, let's move on to one that's even worse, and that would be the Rin Tensei. The Rinne Rebirth technique came out of nowhere, saving everyone who died during Pain's attack. Kinda diminishes the impact of the attack. The scene of the village getting blown away by Shinra Tensei is one of the most impactful scenes in all of manga slash anime. It's this beloved place that we grew up with getting destroyed in a second. It's very impressive and impactful. But then Nagato just resurrects everyone at the end of it, and sure, the village was blown away, but people were fine. And I know what Kishimoto was going for. He wanted Naruto to convince Nagato to become a good guy, and Nagato's final act to be a sacrifice to redeem himself from the bad he did in the world. And I'm completely fine with that. It's also important for Naruto to actually resurrect and save everyone so he gets Konoha's recognition that he's always wanted, and that was what Kishimoto was going for. He wanted Naruto to be recognized by the village as a great shinobi by the end of the Pain arc. And as I said before, this is not the problem. The problem is that you did that in a way that comes completely out of nowhere in the most miraculous solution you could ever ask for. We know that if Naruto didn't save everyone, people would definitely hate him because the village was blown away because of him, because Pain was coming after him. Naruto not being there was definitely one of the reasons why the village got blown up. So if people weren't saved, Naruto wouldn't really get that warm, welcoming heroes party after the arc. But the way it happened, Nagato told Naruto, "Oh yes, Naruto, by the way, I have a seventh path, a jutsu that allows me to revive every single person that I just killed in the village, as a matter of fact. Isn't it amazing that you convinced me to be a good guy now and I can resurrect everyone and everything's going to be solved?" Now, I do understand that the Rinne Rebirth is very important to bring Madara back later on. The Rinne Rebirth existing isn't inherently bad because Naruto has had resurrecting abilities since the tuning exams with the Edo Tensei. Naruto is a type of story that deals with resurrections and reincarnations and all that, so this is to be expected. You don't even have to cut that. You can actually keep the Rinne Rebirth, bringing everyone back, make Naruto the biggest hero ever. It makes sense because Naruto conquering his hatred and talking to Nagato, convincing him to bring everyone back something powerful. But the only thing I'm asking is for you to foreshadow the Rinne Rebirth. Do something to tell the audience that this is a possibility. Anything. Don't just make it come out of nowhere because people are just going to scratch their heads. Of course, some people were just going to be glad that Kakashi didn't actually die, but seriously, just foreshadow that type of thing. It's too big of a deal. It's too impactful for you to just make it come out of nowhere. But Rinne Tensei isn't nearly as bad as the worst contender in this video, which I want you guys to take a guess guess what jutsu is it gonna be, the worst Espel in Naruto. And that honor, or dishonor, goes to Izanami by Itachi Uchiha. So Itachi is fighting Kabuto. He can't kill Kabuto because if he does so, he cannot release the Edo Tensei. So he has to control Kabuto somehow and make him do so. He also can't cast a genjutsu on Kabuto because he closed his eyes and he is just fighting through his Sage Mode senses. And this is an actually very interesting high-stakes fight. Wow, they have a lot of limitations here. Itachi and Sasuke are definitely gonna have to work hard to find a solution, and they're gonna have to be very clever, which is interesting because we know Itachi and Sasuke are amazing battle strategists. But no, we don't get that. Instead, we get a jutsu that ticks every single box Itachi had to tick in order to win this fight. It's a jutsu that does not kill Kabuto. It's a jutsu that allows Itachi to control Kabuto. It's a jutsu that's gonna end the battle instantly as soon as it procs. And of course, it's a jutsu that wasn't foreshadowed whatsoever. Wouldn't it have been more interesting if Itachi and Sasuke had to come up with this 5,000 IQ strategy in order to catch Kabuto off guard and do something about it? Then Izanami coming out of nowhere. Oh, by the way, I have Izanami. It's the perfect jutsu for this very situation. That's very coincidental. Who'd have thought? And Kishimoto knew it was an absolute Espel because he tried to make Izanami the most complicated jutsu in the entire series so that people would just be like, okay, this is very complex, man. Look at this. You may say that Izanagi was foreshadowing for Izanami. And yeah, Izanagi and Izanami are siblings in Shinto mythology, and you would expect to see them together. So if there's an Izanagi, there's probably gonna be an Izanami and all that. But still, we never hear anything about Izanami before it's used. Izanagi was very well foreshadowed. It was first introduced in the fight against Danzo. In that fight, it wasn't used as a way to outright win the fight or escape the fight. It was used as a way to make the fight more interesting. And then when Obito used it against Conan, that's when the foreshadowing was useful, because if Obito had pulled Izanagi out of nowhere without context, without the Danzo versus Sasuke fight for the first time against Conan, that would have been terrible. It would have been this amazing, unbeatable jutsu that served the situation perfectly. As we got to know the jutsu beforehand and know it's possible in a situation that is not as extreme, we actually accept and think it's cool for Obito to use Izanagi against Conan. But Izanami, that's a completely different story. Itachi uses it for the first time against Kabuto, and it so happens to be the perfect jutsu to break the Edo Tensei. That wasn't an easy fight to write because of all the limitations Itachi and Sasuke had, but that's what makes fights interesting. If characters have to break their heads in order to come up with an interesting strategy to win, that makes the fight so much more intriguing. So yeah, Izanami ruined that fight, and it is probably my least favorite jutsu in the entire Naruto-verse. Check out my Naruto rewrite. I am eventually gonna tackle all of these jutsus and make some changes to them so that they suit the narrative a little bit better. There are many episodes in the rewrite and you're probably gonna enjoy it. Also, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and thanks for watching.